Good afternoon. I got a question from one of our good friends who left a message that I just got, and since it's a question about a video, I figured it's worthwhile to make a video about it. I made a statement in the video where I said that among the Hungarian Hasidim, generally you had some people were a Rebbe, some people were a Rav, and some people were both a Rebbe and a Rav. And in general, if someone was a Rebbe and a Rav in the Hungarian community, being a Rav was more important than being a Rebbe. What exactly do I mean by that? And that being a Rebbe was secondary to being a Rav. Like, for example, someone like the Satmar Rav. It's pretty clear that his even though he was a Chassidish Rebbe, but his office of being a Rav was his really main office, and being a Rebbe was almost secondary. What do we mean by that? First of all, what's the difference between a Rebbe and a Rav? Really, in Hebrew, all Rabbi is the possessive, first person possessive form of Rav. So what's the difference between? So you say my Rav is that's where the word rabbi comes from, means my Rav, my master, my teacher. Master in the sense, although it's the same word that a servant and a master also, it says Rabbo, his Rav, his master. And so the question is, what's the difference between a Rebbe and a Rav? And we know, like among the Hasidim, we have this concept of a Rebbe, which you might have similar, like by some Sephardim, they have Mekubalim, they have a Baba, they have Admor. What exactly does it mean? What's the difference between a Rebbe and a Rav? And by the Hasidim, the Rebbe is he has a certain office that it's not really necessary in Judaism. First of all, you can be a totally good Jew without a Rebbe. Without a Rav, it's a little bit harder. I wouldn't say it's impossible. And a good rabbi should fill both offices, the Rebbe and the Rav. So again, but what do we mean by this? So, in the earlier days, for sure, a Rav was a more official position, and the Rebbe was more of a unofficial position. That's one aspect of the difference between a Rebbe and a Rav. A Rav is the chief rabbi of the community. He's the one who makes the decisions in halacha and so forth, and he has to, paskin shilas and things like that, answer questions. He's an authority figure. A Rebbe doesn't really have any authority, except the one that they make for him, which it's not like a real authority the way that a Rav has authority in his community. A Rebbe is to give advice, to give counseling, to be involved in mystical things. A Rebbe will and in a certain sense, a Rebbe is an entertainer. I don't mean that in a negative way. But I'm saying, a Rebbe, he makes a tish, and he's an inspirational speaker. He's a charismatic figure. There's a lot of mystical things which some people might even compare in certain ways to other religions, and things that are really superfluous and are there to address, I would say, psychological and spiritual needs that people have. But again, you can be a perfectly good kosher Jew without these extra things. That's and so of course Now there are certain people who are not a Rav, who are just a Rebbe. Lubavitcher Rebbe was a Rebbe, not a Rav. And he would often say so. If someone would come and ask him a shaila, he said, that's a shaila for a Rav, not for a Rebbe. And there are certain issues which are interesting. There was a case recently where part of the Sefer Torah fell in it was in the Hasidic community and in London. They asked their chief rabbi, who dresses like a Rebbe. You'd see him, you'd think this is a Hasidic Rebbe, but he's a Rav, not the Rebbe. And he said, this is a question, it's a shaila for a Rebbe, not for a Rav. Why? Well, basically, first of all, I mean, the simple meaning of it is never says, every Cheder kid knows. You go even to Reform Hebrew school, you probably learn. I seem to remember hearing something along these lines in the Reform Hebrew school when I was a kid, that if Chas v'Shalom the Sefer Torah falls, you fast for 40 days. Everybody knows this. Where does it come from? Well, it comes from Kabbalistic sources. It's nowhere in Shulchan Aruch, it's nowhere in the Talmud. There's no obligation to fast for 40 days if Chas v'Shalom, if God forbid the Sefer Torah falls. Most likely it's a good thing to fast one day or something, but this fasting for 40 days, and then the question will be, well, how much, if only half the Sefer Torah falls, how much do you have to fast, and so forth, and these type of questions. These are legitimate questions, and so this particular Rav in England, he properly stated that this is a question for a Rebbe and not for a Rav. Meaning there are certain things that you need a Rebbe for, not a Rav, but you don't really need a Rebbe, because the fact of the matter is, there's no halacha in Shulchan Aruch, not mentioned in Chazal anywhere, they have to fast for 40 days if the Sefer Torah falls. And so the need to ask that question would be derived from not any actual halachic need, but rather from a spiritual feeling in your heart that you're so broken that the Sefer Torah fell, and you know that it means something in your life, and this is something that you interpret into your life, that, this must mean something, this must be some omen of something, and it means that I have to repent of some sin, and how do I go about doing that? And in order to accomplish that, you go to a Rebbe to rectify that, because you feel it in your own soul that you need a tikkun. You're cognizant, you're self-aware, you're spiritually awakened to the point where you recognize in yourself that I need this. This is not acceptable. This is something really. This is a sign of something much worse in my life, that the Sefer Torah fell, and that I should witness such a horrible thing happening, and it tears up my soul, and I need to ask a Rebbe, how do I address this issue? How do I rectify this? What kind of tikkun can I make? Meaning, it's not something you need to do. It's something that you choose to do based on some kind of a spiritual awakening and inspiration that you have in your soul to address. And these are personal things. These are not communal things, except the Hasidic movement created a community of like-minded individuals who sought more spirituality in their lives, a different flavor of spirituality than you find in other places. I have a phone call coming. We'll continue this. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe.